Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, which is going to be covering the last series of muscles that you will need to know for muscle identification. These muscles are part of the leg, and we're going to go through them as we have with the others, one at a time, identifying origin, insertion, other aspects of the muscle that we need to know. So, the first four muscles that we're covering today are going to be vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, and rectus femoris. So those are the muscles that we're going to be covering, first four muscles. What I would like to do before we actually get into the details of each of those is to go ahead and start with a picture and look at what they, where they are and what they look like. So we're going to start with that picture, and I'm going to again turn to Netter as that image. So the reason I'm going this direction in terms of the format is because these four muscles are really acting as a group, and they're on the anterior portion of the thigh. And let's go ahead and identify them. So starting over here, we have vastus lateralis. Let's get a better highlighter. Vastus lateralis. We have rectus femoris. We have vastus intermedius. And we have vastus medialis. So these are the big four muscles that are on the anterior portion of the upper leg. And they're grouped together. And they all are going to insert in this at the same location, which is the tibial tuberosity. So they're really acting as a unit. And that's why I wanted to show you the picture of all four of them together before we start looking at them individually. Now, one of these is a bit difficult to identify, and that's vastus intermedius, which you can see right here. That's the muscle, but it's sitting underneath this muscle. So in this image, we remove this muscle, which is the rectus femoris, and then underneath it, we find the vastus intermedius muscle. Let's go ahead and look at that same muscle using the textbook picture. So here we are. So in this case, rectus femoris has been cut so that you can see underneath the muscle. And then the vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, rectus femoris, and vastus intermedius. Those four muscles, as I said, they're all connected in the sense that they all insert on the same structure, which is the tibial tuberosity right here. So we're going to take those muscles one at a time, break them down, and take a look at all of the origins, insertions, and actions of these muscles. So let's go ahead and begin that with the first muscle, which is vastus medialis. And we'll go ahead and write in all the information we need. So origin is going to be the linea aspera of femur. And we'll identify exactly what that means in just a bit. The insertion is the tibial tuberosity. And the action is extend the lower leg. So an extension of the lower leg is what you do when you kick a soccer ball down the field. First, you flex the lower leg, bring it back. That is, this is the lower leg below the knee. And then you launch it forward to kick the ball, and that's an extension of the lower leg. Okay? So let's go ahead and identify those locations. Linea aspera. To see that, we're going to have to go to the posterior aspect of the leg, of the femur, in fact. And so here, if we look at this, so we're talking about the vastus medialis, and here is the vastus medialis, and you can see there's this red line, that very narrow red line that goes all the way up here. So if we're looking at the femur, and this is our femur, and we find the posterior aspect of the femur, and that's this big notch, so we know that's, so basically it's going to be a line that starts approximately right here and just goes along the edge here like this, okay, like that. And then the insertion obviously is the tibial tuberosity. Let's grab a bone there. That's this location right here. That's the tibial tuberosity. So let's go ahead and mark that out on the bones. And so unfortunately, it looks like I made a boo-boo here because I didn't show you the anterior part of the femur, so I can't actually show you that, but I can mark this, which is the insertion for this muscle. And so tibialis medialis, or vastus medialis, and there's the muscle right there, isolated, and obviously it's on, and it goes all the way down here, of course. Obviously it's on the medial side of the leg. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and do the next muscle, which is the vastus lateralis. And we'll start with that origin, vastus lateralis. Greater trochanter. Insertion, once again, tibial tuberosity. And action, extend lower leg. Okay. All right, so let's find that. And here we go. So, greater trochanter, vastus lateralis. So here's my greater, and there is the vastus lateralis muscle right there. Okay, this is my greater trochanter. So it's located right there, and its insertion is right here. Okay. So let's go ahead and mark that out. In this case, we can do it. So it's right here. And then the insertion is right here. And right there. And here is that muscle. Vastus lateralis. Okay. All right, that's the vastus lateralis. Next muscle is going to be vastus intermedius. Vastus intermedius. So let's go ahead and get our information down. Vastus intermedius. Origin, anterior, and lateral surface of femur. Tibial tuberosity. And I'm hoping you begin to see that why I showed you them all together at one time, because they have this very common insertion and action. Extend lower leg. Okay. So let's go ahead and find that anterior and lateral surface of the femur. So, and we're talking about vastus intermedius. And here we are, big swath of red right here. That's our vastus intermedius. And the insertion is right down here. So, vastus intermedius. Okay. So let's go ahead and mark that out on our, so all of this basically. And then right here. And right here. And here is the muscle. There. Okay. So, coming back to the actual bone itself. So, on the anterior portion of the bone, here's the greater trochanter. So this right here was the vastus lateralis muscle, right? So that's where that was located. And then it comes all the way down. And then the vastus intermedius is this whole surface of the bone. Okay, a little bit hard to see. I can't get a broad enough perspective. But it's this entire region of the bone right there. Okay. And all of those muscles are inserting here on the tibial tuberosity. All right, vastus intermedius. Let's go ahead and do the next muscle, which is rectus femoris. And we're going to go ahead and put down origin. And here I want you to notice something. So I'm just going to write it down and see if you notice the differences here. Okay. Rectus femoris, anterior, inferior, iliac spine. Anterior, inferior, iliac spine. Did you notice anything different with what the other two or the other three muscles were all originating? Let's review. So in this case, this is vastus intermedius, anterior and lateral surface of the femur. Vastus lateralis, greater trochanter, again on the femur. Vastus medialis, linea aspera of the femur. So once again, we're on the femur. And all of a sudden now, we are no longer beginning at the femur. We're actually beginning on the hip bone. So what that means is that we're now crossing two joints, here and here. And what that means is, you'll see in a second, we can get two different actions out of this muscle. The other two were all connected to this bone, the femur, and attached to that. So the only action it could produce is down here at this joint. But since we're now starting here and moving across two joints, we can actually get two different actions. So the insertion is the same, but the origin is now different. So tibia, or tibial, tuberosity. And here is extend lower leg, so no big deal there, right? We know about that. Now, and flex the thigh. That means bringing the thigh up towards your chin. So bringing the femur up towards your chin, because we're crossing the two joints, as you can see here in the picture. So I get two different actions because of the origin is different. So let's go ahead and find my origin. So the rectus femoris. Okay, so this is the superior iliac spine. This is the inferior iliac spine, or anterior iliac spine. Let's look at it in different. That's posterior view. This is a better view, anterior view. So rectus femoris here. Okay, so anterior superior iliac spine, anterior inferior iliac spine right there. So if we're looking at the hip bone, if you recall, that's it right there. This is the anterior superior iliac spine. That's the anterior inferior iliac spine. It's coming off of that location right there. So let's go ahead and put that into our notes. So right here. Okay. And then, once again, the same location right here. We can mark this here. Okay. All right, so those four muscles, let's once again review the image. So vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and obviously the names are telling you their locations. Vastus intermedius, which is sitting on top of the femur and covered up by the rectus femoris, which sits directly on top of it. Here, once again, we've cut out a section of that to expose the muscle underneath. And going back to my favorite artist, so vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, rectus femoris. If we remove that muscle underneath, we see the vastus intermedius. Okay, all inserting here below the knee on the tibial tuberosity. And here I want to take a moment and just make a point here. So let's take a look at this drawing. Okay, so let me scoot in so we can see it more clearly. So this is the quadriceps femoris tendon. So the quads are those four muscles, okay? And see how they kind of encircle the femur, okay? So this would be lateralis, medialis. Underneath would be rectus femoris. And then we have the patella, and then we have a ligament. So we're using two different terminologies here. We're using tendon and ligament. Where did it go? Right there. Ligament. Okay. Why does that change? It's connective tissue. It's a continuous sheet of connective tissue that passes through the patellar bone. So the patellar bone is embedded in that connective tissue. But up here we're using the word tendon, and down here we're using the word ligament. Why is that? And the answer is, what is the definition? A tendon connects muscle to bone. So this is all connected together. This is all muscle, connective tissue attaching to this bone. So that makes that a tendon. Then from here to here, that's a bone connection. So that becomes a ligament. Okay. All righty, Rudy. So those are the major muscles on the anterior surface of the leg, on the thigh, in fact. And we've got a couple more in that same region that we're going to deal with. So let's begin there. We have something called the sartorius muscle. Let's get the information down, and I'll talk a little bit about the naming of this muscle. So sartorius muscle. Origin. Anterior, superior iliac spine. Anterior. Superior. Iliac spine. And then the insertion is the medial surface of the tibia. And now I want you to pay attention to the actions of this muscle because there's a number of them. So, sartorius is going to flex lower leg. Flexes, abducts, and laterally rotates the thigh. So flexing the lower leg means that the leg below the knee comes backward towards your back. And then flexing the thigh means that the thigh comes up towards your head. And then abducting, moving the thigh away from midline, and laterally rotating it so that the knee is rotating away from midline. If you put all of these movements together, you cross your leg. So the cross leg position, when you sit down and cross your legs, sit one leg on top of the other leg in that cross leg position, you need to do all of these movements. So the sartorius muscle is going to allow that to happen. There are some additional muscles that are helping, of course, but the sartorius muscle does all of these actions. And hence the name sartorius, which means tailor. So this is sometimes called the tailor's muscle. And the reason that we identify that as the tailor's muscle is because in the old days, when tailors were without machines, they would sit down on a chair, cross their legs, and provide a platform for the garment that they were sewing on. So by crossing your leg, you kind of create kind of a table, for, if you will, with that crossed leg, and that you can sit the cloth that you're working on that as you're sewing and making your garment. So that's why it's called the tailor's muscle. Okay. So flexing the lower leg, flexing the thigh, abducting the thigh, and laterally rotating the thigh. All right, so let's identify the muscle in the image, and that's this one right here. That muscle right there. Let's go ahead and look at a couple of images. Here we go. Now remember, we're starting at the anterior superior iliac spine, so that's above the hip. It's right there, and we're going to cross the leg, and then we're going to cross the knee, and we're going to insert here on the medial side on the tibia. Okay, so we make this big band across the leg in this fashion here. Okay, let's take a look at find that real quick like. Where did it go? Here we go. That's posterior. I don't want that. This is anterior. So here we go. Sartorius muscle, origin, anterior, superior iliac spine, and then the insertion is going to be all the way down here on this side of the tibia. So to begin with, we're going to start right here. We're going to start right there. We're going to cross the leg, and we're going to end up inserting on the medial side of the knee, which would be, in this case, in this region right here. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and highlight that. And we're going to start right here. Okay. And we're going to end up right here. Uh-oh. SpaghettiOs. There we go. Okay. Sartorius muscle. The next muscle is the gracilis, and all we need to know right here is the action and this is going to adduct the thigh. And here we can see that muscle right here. It's a very thin muscle, flat, thin muscle. Let's see if I have right there. Okay, so this is on the inside thigh because it's adducting, moving the thigh in towards the midline. And that's exactly where it should be positioned if we want to produce that movement. Okay, and let's turn to Netter and see if we can get a good image of that there. We do indeed. So here it is right here. Right? And then here it is more exposed. Right there. Okay, that's the gracilis. Okay. Well, moving on, we're now going to do another muscle, which hopefully everybody kind of knows where this one is. And this is the gluteus maximus. And here also we just simply need to know what the action is. So extends the thigh and laterally rotates the thigh. Okay, and let's go ahead and highlight that muscle right here. Do one side. Couple of interesting things about this muscle. This is a very well-developed muscle in humans. So most, if not all, of the muscles that we're studying can also be found in other animals such as dogs, cats, giraffes, tigers, and bears. Oh my. They sometimes are broken down into smaller muscles. So, for example, the deltoid muscle on most animals are actually really 3 separate muscles rather than a single muscle. But getting back to the gluteus maximus, this is a very large muscle proportionate to our body in humans, much larger proportionate to our bodies than other mammals. And the reason is because this muscle is very important in our standing erect position. So this muscle becomes more developed in our bipedal movement or bipedal stance to support that stance. So basically, humans have big butt muscles, bigger than most, in fact, other mammals, because they don't need that development as much because they have 4 legs rather than just the 2 legs. Okay, so gluteus maximus. Can we see it in images? Indeed we can. Let's do that. Let's find. Okay. So did I just lie to you? I think I just lied to you. It's interesting. All right, well, we see it in this image. And we're going to have to leave it at that. So apparently I didn't get that one out. Okay, gluteus maximus. Let's move on and do muscles on the posterior aspect. The posterior aspect of the thigh. So we're going to do biceps femoris first, and then we're going to do semitendinosus and semimembranosus. These 3 muscles together are very much similar to the 4 muscles that we saw on the anterior portion of the thigh. And let's begin with the biceps femoris and the origin. And here we have 2 origins. So we're going to have long head. And this will be the ischial tuberosity. And we're going to have a short head. this will be the linea aspera of femur. The insertion is the head of fibula. And the action is flexes, lower leg, bringing the lower leg back, and extending thigh. So two different locations as far as the origins. And let's go ahead and identify those locations. Okay. So linea aspera of the femur and ischial tuberosity. First, the ischial tuberosity. So biceps femoris, long head, right there. Okay, see right there. Okay. Then we're going to need the biceps femoris, linea aspera, which is the short head, and it's just simply a line along the back of the femur. Okay. So we've got them coming from here and here. That's why it's called biceps, two heads, one head here, one head here. And then it inserts on the head of the fibula, and let's see where that is. There it is. Head of the femur, biceps femoris. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and ischial tuberosity. Ischial tuberosity is this lumpy part of the bone right here. That's my ischial tuberosity. Okay. And then we're going to have a thin line along the femur here. Okay. Proximal, distal, and this is the posterior aspect. So we're going to have a line around here. Okay. And then we've got the head of the fibula, which is right here. That's where it inserts, right there. Okay. So starting off with red, we want here. Okay. And we're going to have a line here. And then we're going to insert on the head of the fibula, which is right here. And that's our biceps femoris. Let's go ahead and look at some pictures. Okay, biceps femoris. Here it is right here. Let me shoot in so we can see it close. Biceps femoris. So we're moving over towards the head of the fibula, which is on the lateral side. Okay, and that muscle right there, okay, is the biceps femoris. Now the head, the long head is way up here. So we're seeing that connection here. The short head is underneath. So if you're actually looking at the muscle, it's difficult to see the short head because it's right on top of, it's sitting right on top of its own insertion on the femur. So as it passes across the top or the posterior aspect of the femur, it is also connected there. So it sits on top of the short head, the insertion. And then it goes to this side of the leg, which you'll notice is the lateral side. Okay, so because here's my sacrum, and so this is the outside lateral side. That's where the fibula is located. It's right there. Okay. So as you can see, these three muscles that we're learning, and the biceps femoris is one of those. We're going to look at this, semimembranosus and semitendinosus as well. Those three together are called the hamstring muscles. And so when you get a hamstring injury, it's involved those three muscles there. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at the next two, which is semitendinosus and semimembranosus. And I'm going to give you a little trick here to distinguish between the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus. So I want to scoot in just a little bit more and talk about that. So in semitendinosus, there's a T, and that T is going to stand for top. And I'll explain why that's important in just a second. But just remember, the T in semitendinosus means top. And then semimembranosus, we have 1, 2, 3 M's, a lot of M's. And all those M's stand for medial. So we get the semitendinosus on top of the semimembranosus, and they're both coming off the medial side of the knee, or they're both inserting, I should say, on the medial side of the knee. So we have three muscles. The biceps femoris goes to the lateral side. The other two are together with the tendinosus on top, and both of those muscles are inserting on the medial side, which would be the tibia. Okay, so that's how you're going to tell it apart. The other thing about semimembranosus, membrane. You see the word membrane in that. This is a very flat muscle, and so you're seeing it on both sides, here and here. It's a very flat muscle. And the tendinosus is more of a straight string-like or rope-like muscle, more tendon-like, okay? And that sits on top of the semimembranosus. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the information for those into our notes. We'll start with semitendinosus. And there it is, semitendinosus. And we're going to start with the origin, which is the ischial tuberosity. Okay. And then the insertion is going to be the medial surface of the tibia. And the action is going to flex the lower leg and extends the thigh. Okay, well, there's no N in there. Okay, and T, we'll just put this down, T equals top. It's the topmost muscle. So let's see if we can get that. So, semitendinosus, origin. Semitendinosus, the origin, is the ischial tuberosity. Okay. We'll also see that is for the membranosus. So the biceps femoris, the semitendinosus, and the semimembranosus are all connected to the ischial tuberosity, which is why hamstring injuries can happen, because we have three big muscles attached to the same location, and if I am not careful, if I yank on this with those three very powerful muscles, I can actually damage that connection, and that would be a hamstring injury. And then we're going to come in and insert down here semimembranosus. Okay, and where's my semitendinosus? Right here. Semitendinosus, right there. Okay. All right, so let's do this. So semimembranosus, location in red right here. Okay. And then we're going to come into the medial side, and that would be right here. Okay. And in red, or yellow I should say, it's that muscle right there. Okay. Next, the next muscle is the semimembranosus. Again, part of the hamstring group of muscles. And let's go ahead and get our information first. Semimembranosus. Ischial tuberosity. Insertion is the medial condyle of tibia. And the action is flexes lower leg and extends thigh. Okay. And if we are going to do our little red marking here, okay, and then the blue would be right here. And let's go ahead and add this piece of information here. So AMS equal medial side. All right, well, let's take a look at those muscles once again. And here they are. Biceps femoris, ischial tuberosity, the femur, can't see that connection because the muscle is sitting on top of that connection, and then going to the lateral side just below the knee. So that's the biceps femoris. Semitendinosus, it's the top one. T stands for top, and it's a more tendon-like or looking muscle. And again, that's coming off the ischial tuberosity, but it's going to the medial side of the knee. Underneath it, then, is the semimembranosus, and those M stand for medial. It also indicates through the name membranous, very flat muscle. So you can see it extending off of both sides here and on this side there. And again, going to the medial side of the knee. Okay? So those are those three muscles. I do have a picture of the gluteus maximus. There it is. So, whoop-de-doo. Okay. So, those are the hamstring muscles. Let's go ahead and do the next muscle. Which is the gastrocnemius muscle. Gastrocnemius muscle. And this muscle is named after the stomach. I have no idea how that came to be. Apparently somebody was hungry when they named this muscle. It reminded somebody of the stomach. I don't see it, but maybe you do. Anyway, gastrocnemius. Let's get the information first, and then we'll look at it. So we're going to, the origin is the lateral and medial condyles of femur. The insertion is the calcaneal or calcaneus tuberosity, and the action is plantar flex and plantar flex the foot, I apologize, and flex the lower leg. Okay. Lateral and medial condyles of the femur, so we're crossing the knee, and then it's going to insert on the calcaneal tuberosity. So in red, we're going to start here, and then, or here, and here, and then we're going to insert right here. Okay. Let's go ahead and see, this would be posterior. Yep, here we go. Well, you got that. Okay. Gastrocnemius muscle, medial head. Gastrocnemius muscle, lateral head. So we've got two heads. We could have called this a biceps something or other, but it wasn't. It was called a gastrocnemius. 2 points of origin. And then we're going to insert on the calcaneal tuberosity, which apparently I don't have a picture of, but that's fine. Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Here we go. Right there. Okay. That's the back. That's the heel of your foot. Okay. Oakley dokleys. Let's take a look at a picture. And here's a nice one here. We'll start with this one because we can reinforce our last discussion. Okay. So we have semitendinosus on top, semimembranosus underneath, biceps femoris. Here is that muscle we've just talked about, the gastrocnemius muscle. We've got two heads. It looks like two muscles. It really does look like two muscles. Here's a better picture. Looks like two muscles. But in fact, it is a single muscle head, but it has two heads of origin. And then here's our big tendon. That's the calcaneal tendon. And there it is inserting onto the heel of the foot. Also called the Achilles tendon. Okay. And so why is it called the Achilles tendon? Well, there's a famous person in history called Achilles, Greek. And he was a demigod. He was born from the union of a mortal woman and a god. And his mother realized he was going to grow up to be a warrior. She wanted him to survive battles. So she picked him up by the heel like this and dipped him into the river Styx, which is the river the dead cross over. Wherever the water of the Styx River touched his body, he was impervious to any injury. What she forgot to mention, or forgot to realize, is she was holding him by his heels here when she dipped him in the water. So her fingers were covering that. And that is where he was eventually undone. An arrow cut off that tendon. If that happens in real life, then you are not going to walk, because these muscles allow you to plantar flex your foot, which is, of course, part of walking. And if you can't do that, you're not going to walk. So that is the gastrocnemius muscle. Okay. All right, underneath the gastrocnemius muscle is another muscle, which is essentially doing the same thing. It's directly underneath the gastrocnemius muscle. And this is called the soleus. So let's go ahead. Oops, we're going to color this in. Here we go. There. And there. Okay. All righty, Rudies. So the soleus, let's get our information down first. The soleus, origin. Origin is the head and medial border of the tibia. Head and medial border of tibia. Okay. Insertion is again the calcaneus tuberosity. And the action is plantar flex of foot. Notice there's only one action. And why is that? Because it only crosses one joint. It's only crossing the ankle joint. The gastrocnemius was crossing two joints, the knee and the ankle joint. But this one only one. And so it only has one action. Head and medial border of the tibia. So let's go ahead and see if we can identify that. We should be able to. I don't know why we don't show it here. Posterior. Oh, interesting. Let's see. Yeah. Well, Netter has let me down. So he doesn't show it. So we'll just have to do it ourselves. Head and medial border of the tibia. Head and medial border of the tibia. So that's right here. And it's going to be posterior. So we're going to just put this in here. This is the medial side. Head, medial border, there. Okay. And then it's going to insert on the calcaneal tuberosity here. Okay. I can't believe that. I'm sussing over that. Weird. Okay. What else can we say about this? Let's take a look at the muscle. So here is the gastrocnemius muscle cut away, and underneath it is the soleus muscle. Okay. And in the diagram from your textbook, we can see that here. Gastrocnemius muscle, and then the soleus is underneath it. So they don't show a cutaway view of that. They do have a lateral view. So here's my gastrocnemius on top, and underneath is the soleus muscle. Okay. Okay. So that is the soleus muscle. And we have one more muscle, I believe, to cover. And that's going to be, let's go ahead and paint in soleus muscle here, soleus. Okay, and then we can see a little bit sticking out there and a little bit there. Okay. All right. Okay, last muscle. Tibialis anterior, and here we simply need to know the action, and that's dorsiflex. Flex the foot. Dorsiflex is the foot. And in our picture, it's this muscle right here. Okay. And we have a good shot of it right here. Tibialis anterior. So obviously it's going to be on the anterior surface of the lower leg and right next to the tibial muscle, or tibial bone, excuse me, right there. Okay, so that's our muscle right there, tibialis anterior. Okay. And the last structure, as you'll notice, is the calcaneal tendon, also called the Achilles tendon. We already pointed that out. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the last of the muscles that and the structures that you need to know for this final portion of the lab. And good luck, and we'll see you when we start lecturing on the muscle tissue chapter, chapter 10.